Okay, good evening, everybody, and welcome to Bermuda's first ever Pride event. Here. All right. Okay, moving along. Okay, guys. Okay. Where's David and Chen then? Oh, just here. Thank you, everybody. Now that you've got that out of your system. Welcome to the panel discussion. This is an event that arose out of a conference, Beyond Homophobia. that Moji over there organized in Jamaica in January of this year. It was an awesome event, but it inspired us. David will tell you more about that later. We're going to have Zakia shortly introduce the panelists who are other participants in the conference with us. That is pretty awesome. We do have... That was Zena Edwards, Moji's friend. We do have this little note in the back because we've chosen Upi, Wilfred Main, to be the Grand Marshal of the parade. I'm sort of the old lady of the group. So I was a contemporary of Upi, and he's very close to everybody's heart. He passed by reason of a homophobic murder 25 years ago, which was just a few short months after homosexuality was partially decriminalized in Bermuda. So it is important to remember him. I had seen when I came certain members of his family at the entrance at the same time. Are any of them in the room right now? No? But they will be present at the parade tomorrow, and we look forward to seeing them. But remember, this is to some degree about him and all the steps we've taken in the past 25 years to get past it as well. So again, welcome. Enjoy the discussion this evening. I'm certainly looking forward to it. And over to David.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. We're really, really happy to see all of you. It's wonderful. I just wanted to give you a little background to how we got to the point of organizing Pride, Chen, Liz, and myself. Last October, I got a little ping in my inbox, and being a bit of an academic geek, it was a call for papers at a conference in Jamaica called Beyond Homophobia. Now, as you can see, the very shy and retiring Dr. Moji Anderson organized this conference. Please stand up. You see how shy she is? So I sent an email saying, well, Bermuda should be there, and I got an email back from her going, yes, please come! So we did. Chen, Liz, and myself went down to present, and what we decided to present on was the three eras, if you like, of legislative change in Bermuda, according to what we had been actively involved in. So Liz, she's not that old, I don't know why she's saying that, but Liz talked about the Stubbs Bill, the 1994 decriminalization. I talked about the 2 words and a comma campaign to get us to the inclusion of sexual orientation in the Human Rights Act. And Chen spoke about the very recent court cases on adoption, immigration, and equal marriage. So we presented, and we thought it would be really useful for us to dialogue with our neighbors about the progress in LGBTQI history and developments. And what we found when we got there, we were astonished. We met these incredible people on this stage here, and I mean incredible, incredible. So we presented, we talked about our legislative achievements, sort of with the Bermudian big head. And what we noticed, what we found in the conference was that, yes, Bermuda, there was a lot of similarities, but there was a lot of differences. So the similarities were that we faced a lot of the same challenges, particularly coming from the church, or churches, and I'm sure these guys will talk about that. And we sort of found that the biggest difference, though, I would say, is that, yes, we have had all these legislative changes, but what was lacking, or what we felt was lacking in Bermuda, was civil society organization, academic research, grassroots work. And you will hear from these guys what's been going on in their respective countries of Guyana, Trinidad and Tobago, Jamaica, and Barbados. And they really inspired us because, yep, we've got there on a journey of earlier with the legislative changes, but these guys will talk about what they've been doing in their countries to advance LGBTQI and the lives of us in those countries. So I don't want to take any more time away, because I really want to hand over to Zakia Johnson-Lord, co-deputy chair of Out Bermuda. She is going to be our host for the evening, and I will hand over to you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. It's lovely to see so many familiar faces, and it's also lovely to meet you all today. I am going to use this paper only because I want to stay on topic. I am very interested in the topic, and so therefore this paper is required. I'm going to do a brief introduction of the individuals. I think just the name and what organization they represent. Javion Nelson, I'll start, Executive Director of JFLAG, the Jamaica Forum for Lesbians, All Sexuals, and Gays. Suel Anglin, thank you. Assistant Director of Marketing, Communication, and Engagement at JFLAG, and manages the execution of Pride in Jamaica. Ron Mohammed, founder of She Barbados, and organizer of Barbados LGBTQI Pride. Rudolph, who goes by Rudy, I'm not going to get that, Hanamji, Chair of Pride Trinidad and Tobago, and last but not least, Dr. Nastasia Rambaran, Public Health Advocate at SASOD, the Society Against Sexual Orientation Discrimination in Guyana. So if you would just join me really quickly in welcoming these individuals to our home. So I have a question. It's not going to be the first one, so I've already lost the plot. But I do want to quickly just ask, what made you say yes to us, to Bermuda, to the organizers? I know we've heard a bit why David wanted you all here, but what made you find us worthy? Any of you can take the time, but what about it? What about engaging with other small island nations, or that's how I describe Bermuda, makes you want to talk to our people, make you see yourselves in us?
Okay. I think it's important that when we talk about LGBT rights, when we talk about LGBT people, when we talk about pride, within the Caribbean, I think it's important for Caribbean people to lead that conversation. And it's always important for us to put that narrative out there.
Sure.
I can speak from Jamaica. I know oftentimes when we hear about the narrative, a lot of people hear about Jamaica, LGBT life and culture there. It's always something very like, oh my God, how are you living? Oh my God, are you that? Oh, I feel so bad for what, And so oftentimes when we tell people that there is a big community in Jamaica, LGBT people out and about every day, just living their lives, people are shocked. They're like, in Jamaica? And we're like, yeah, we just had our 5th Pride celebration. Pride Week in Jamaica. So whenever I have an opportunity to kind of go out there and talk about what's happening in my country, and how that is affecting me as a black lesbian woman living in Jamaica, and many others like me and others in the community. It's always a yes for me, as long as I can get there, as long as there's nice food and nice weather.
That's right. Yes. Does anyone else want to take it? I appreciate that answer.
Well, Trinidad and Tobago just hosted Cari Festa, which is the Caribbean's largest celebration of arts and culture. And Cari Festa travels across the region every 2 years. But I start there to say that it's only together that we are at our strongest. And interestingly enough, the Caribbean started talking about integration and brother, sisterhood, non-binaryhood years before the European Union. And as small island developing states, it was important for Trinidad and Tobago to actively reach out and partner with our neighbors, because the synergies we found at Beyond Homophobia are second to none. So to add support, and not just in writing or in words, but to actively make the decision to show up and provide that level of support and learn firsthand, was for us an invitation that we could not refuse.
Sure. Well, thank you.
Just to add to that, this is loud. I was also curious to see Bermuda, because we, in the CARICOM region, Bermuda isn't often included in, even though it's part of the English-speaking, I guess, Caribbean. So I was really curious to see what are similarities and our differences and how we can mesh. And then when you guys started your effort, it just literally blew up, and that was amazing. So you kind of like, you know, trailblazing in a way too. And I just think it would be great to talk about synergies to really mesh them together. So I was really excited to come.
Thank you so much. Go for
I
it.
was also just going to add, sorry, before you move on to the next question. So I think with the Caribbean, like Suel said, it's really, really important for us to take control of the narrative, because so often there is that narrative that is placed on us about what is going on within the region. And I think we're so much stronger together as a collective, especially the Anglophone Caribbean, because we do have such similarities in terms of our colonial history. So it's just very, very important that the community is forging the narrative and telling our own stories, so that when they reached out and they said that Bermuda is having their pride, I was just like so thrilled. And similarly to what Nastasia said, oftentimes us within the CARICOM region, we don't hear a lot about Bermuda. We tend to be a little bit of, there's a disconnect there. So I was really excited that we were even, you know, contacted, and it's such an honor to be here.
Oh, thank you. No? I'm into it. So, how have colonial era sodomy laws affected expressions of LGBTQI identities in your country? It's going to go to you since you opted not to say anything.
So in our law, under the Offences Against the Persons Act, under Section 76, 77, and 79, we have what we call colloquially as the buggery law. So, you know, certain acts are prescribed, so it affects both men and women in certain instances, but men. We don't necessarily have a history of strong policing of the law in recent years, and our studies show that the law is not generally applied, particularly to consenting adults. So in a lot of ways, based on our research, it's been used as a form of policing rape and other sexual offenses, because the Sexual Offences Act does not provide enough protection for men and boys and women and girls. So the way in which we define sexual intercourse in our law is very, very limited. So it's about penile vaginal penetration, and that's it. So therefore rape is just that, which is non-consensual. But outside of that, the law creates a culture and an environment where LGBT people are often afraid to be who they are, where the law is often used to paralyze people with fear, and cited by a number of Jamaicans to say, your presence, your belonging here is invalid, and that you do not have a right to be here. So while it's not been used, necessarily been used by law professionals, by the state, it is being used by a number of Jamaicans to police people's expression, to police where people live, and to determine how people should be treated. And consequently, a number of Jamaicans, a significant number of LGBT Jamaicans, do not feel as though they belong in Jamaica, and that it is a safe place for them to live, work, raise their family, and do business.
In Barbados, similarly to Jamaica, we have the Serious Indecency Act, and in Section 9 and 12, certain sex acts are criminalized. And oftentimes, we hear about the buggery law, but we don't think about the fact that intimacy between women is also criminalized. But just like Jamaica, it's not used in the case of consenting adults. It's often used against rape when an older man has an inappropriate relationship with an underage boy. But in Barbados, we do have very comprehensive sexual assault laws that would cover that. So it's really a useless law. But what it does do, in addition to creating an atmosphere of permission for discrimination against LGBT people and saying like, hey, these are second-class citizens, is it also creates a really dangerous conflation with sexual orientation, particularly homosexuality and sexual deviance, you know? So we had an instance a couple of years ago where the Boy Scouts Association, one of the scout leaders, molested a boy, and the head of the scouts came out, the person was charged with buggery, and the head of the association came out and said, we're not going to accept homosexuality in this organization at all. And it's like, but this is not homosexuality. So you see that narrative and those attitudes being permeated through society because of the laws that were, you know, instilled through colonization.
Anybody else have thoughts? We can't hear you.
Similarly, in Guyana, we have the same laws. And I think what's important is the complexity. I mean, people are still living their lives. However, this whole word that keeps popping up, the atmosphere. Last year, Georgetown University did an assessment of LGBTQ persons, the effects of the laws in Guyana. They did a countrywide assessment. They said basically it creates a pervasive atmosphere of policing and fear in both private and public spheres. So, you know, it affects, yeah.
I want to put a placeholder at some point. I want to ask a question. I know it's about the law, but I also wonder how colonization impacts just overall behavior outside of the legal sphere. I think for, you know, a lot of times when people ask me, oh, you're from Bermuda, are y'all still owned by the Queen? Is a question I get, right? And I was like, well, I would not frame it that way. But I certainly have questions asked about the ways in which behavior of folks who are in small island nations have been determined by outside influences, and how that, and as it relates to the LGBT community, like what freedoms are we actually having to take back for ourselves, because otherwise we're taught to do this, right? Like, I mean, I still walk on the left because I always walked on the left, right? Like as a schoolgirl here, I didn't know that freedom was mine to take. You know what I mean? Like, and that's, I speak personally, I don't know anybody else may not have that, but a lot of the things that I am just not questioning is, I was taught not to question here. You know, and I would say because of the ways in which outside influences have always told me I need permission from somebody to make some choice about the things that happen. And so for me, when I hear about colonization, I think sometimes about the simple things as well as the legal framework. And so I want to just put a placeholder for us to have a conversation that's also outside of the legal frame for persons that are from small places that have often had influences that were not of our own. So I just want to place that. So is LGBTQI pride a Western or foreign import, and how does it resonate within your culture?
Well, actually, we have something called the Camboulet riots, which we remember each year. It's the beginning, it's what created our carnival. And the Camboulet riots were really where mainly persons from the African descendancy in Trinidad, they decided to protest against this ordinance that prevented them from celebrating and use of drums, etc. And that is our history of marginalized, oppressed groups utilizing culture, art, as a form of protest to stand for what they believe are their inalienable rights. Sure. So personally, and within our country, we actually see the Pride celebrations as simply an extension of that type of protest. So it's not wanting to have pride because it's something that happens in the global north or Western countries. As a matter of fact, I always make the point that pride was celebrated for 3 decades but some describe it as pride and hide because of some of the issues we have touched on and which we'll deal with later on. So it's not new. And the people of the LGBTQI community have always, at different levels, been proud of who they are, and they have made lives for themselves. And some of us that know, for example, the Trinidad and Tobago flag was designed by a gay man. So how much more proud can you get?
Nice.
But so no, we don't see it as something that is inherited from a Western mold, and we all try to make it local to our experiences and what our community wants. And I think Swellen was sharing a lot about that earlier where we spoke this morning.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think similarly in Jamaica, we get flacked a lot every year when it comes to Pride because of when we celebrate Pride. So in Jamaica, our week runs from August 1st to 6th, which if you know Jamaican history, you know that that is a very sacred time in Jamaica because that's where we celebrate emancipation and independence, which is very big for us. And so every year people are always saying, but why you have this entire year? Why are you celebrating Pride when you know that this is our time to celebrate our culture and freedom from slavery? And we say to people every year, how do you not see the similarities? Like back in the day when people just wanted to be free, we wanted to feel like citizens of the country. We didn't feel that way, we were enslaved. We were told when to eat, when to go outside, what to wear, who we can love, who we can have children with. And 60 odd years later, we're doing the same thing. We're still trying to feel like citizens. We still want to wear what we want. We still want to love who we want. We still just want to exist. We just want to live and be Jamaicans equally like everybody else. So for us, Pride for us is that time of the year. I mean, we do it right throughout the year, but that specific time period is a time when we say, you are not going to tell me that because I am LGBT that I can't be Jamaican. You're not going to tell me that because I'm a part of the community that I can't do this, I can walk this way, I can't go to school here, I can't listen to dancehall music, I can't listen to reggae music. No, I am a Jamaican, and just like you, I'm exercising my birthright to love everything that makes me Jamaican and be proud of everything that makes us equally Jamaican. So for us, Pride is not about outside, and we talk about this all the time. We don't even have a parade because for us, it's about creating spaces that growing up as Jamaicans, you didn't have. I mean, we run up and down the road all the time, and we have carnival and we parade down the road, not a parade, and we skimpy clothes. And if you come to carnival in Jamaica, that is the time when the gays live it, because they're out and about everywhere. But Pride for us is really about taking all those spaces that we could not participate in as children. For example, a sports day. If you were a boy that was very effeminate, you could not go in cheerleading because that's going to mean that you are a homosexual, and that's bullying, and that comes with everything else. So we say, okay, let us have our sports day and put on your cheerleading clothes and go out there and go on top of a pyramid and boom flick and gallivant, right?
That's nice.
So for us, it's about taking all those fun memories we had as children and as Jamaicans that we love and we hold on to so much, and we just make it one big queer space and say, come, live, exist, and be.
Thank you.
So in Barbados, and I think, what was I saying? Right, in Barbados, and I think similarly to a lot of other Caribbean territories, one of the biggest arguments or points of resistance that we hear surrounding Pride is, this is a Western import, this is not something that is indigenous to us. And this is a point that I make all the time. Homophobia is what was imported, before, so before colonization and before, colonial occupancy of our spaces, the people who occupied our land, the indigenous people, did celebrate gender and sexual diversity, and they still do. You look at Two-Spirit people, it was something that was celebrated. A lot of the enslaved people who came over from African territories celebrated gender and sexual diversity, and that was something that was used to criminalize their bodies and their expressions through colonization. And then, through the moral panic in the colonial era, the laws were really brought to us. So homosexuality is not the import, homophobia is the import, and it's really, really important that we reclaim that and tell our own stories.
Thank you.
Zaki, if I could just add quickly, it's an important moment for us to highlight our contribution to national development. Because if we don't, chances are people are going to invisibilize it, right? And that is critical why a celebration period is important. And also, I had the opportunity to meet with the director of Toronto Pride right after our first Pride. And she shared with me that, and we would not have known this had she not said it, the entire global north, ironically, was seeing what was happening in Jamaica, Guyana, Barbados, and Trinidad, and it was actually changing their narrative. Because no longer could certain groups hold on and say that pride was for a certain ilk. We did that in the Caribbean to partly break down, and we have to continue breaking down that narrative, that black and brown people are part of the LGBTQI spectrum. And we can be proud too.
And it's also very important to note too that you don't dictate to us how we celebrate Pride, and you can't dictate to us how we should show, being proud and being free. It's not for you to say, if you want to have Pride, this is how your Pride has to look for it to be qualified as a Pride celebration or Pride whatever. So I think that is also important to note too, is that people from the global north or from the west, you don't dictate to us how we are going to tell you that we're celebrating Pride. That is for you to decide how you want to celebrate your Pride.
Yeah, I think that's really important to note that when people think of pride, a certain type and certain specific imagery comes to their head. Specific types of people, specific class of people, specific body type, people of specific ability. That is the imagery that comes to mind because that's the image that has been conjured up from a global north viewpoint. But it's important to know that with us, it's not new. We're continuing a legacy of work and pride and celebration that has existed through centuries, not even just decades, but centuries in our countries. Like in Barbados, for example, we used to have a Queen of the Bees show that would sell out in national stadiums, and it was a drag show, and that happened all throughout the 60s and 70s. So this work has been going on, and this is just continuing that legacy. It's nothing new. Yeah.
I appreciate that. What does LGBTQI Pride, both the event and the notion of being proud and out and who you are, look like in your country? I think you touched on it a little bit, and I appreciate that. Like, I love the racist part of the sports day. I think that's beautiful. But can we elaborate a bit? Like, what does it look like? While we're not trying to recreate it or be someone else's, I'd love to hear a little bit more about, I guess, the visuals or the feel, for those of you who have been a part of that.
So we have 53 events this year.
Okay.
We're big on stamina. But one of the reasons that actually has to happen is because we have to reflect the diversity of our country. Trinidad and Tobago is by far perhaps the most diverse of the Caribbean nations. We have every ethnic group, every religion, every difference around the spectrum that is well represented in government, in the economy, in business, in social work. So our pride has to reflect opportunity. All of our events, except maybe 4 or 5, are free, because we have to reflect the most vulnerable and the access that they require to see themselves in their pride. So we would have events like the Sports Day, but we'd also have specific panel discussions. This year we dedicated Pride to the trans community, because it was not only Stonewall's 50th, but the trans community also, like in New York and elsewhere, they have been on the front lines of this struggle for so long. And we needed to bring the other segments of the community together to show them those similarities and why they needed to stand with their trans sisters and brothers. So you see other types of events we launched our very first LGBTQI art exhibit, and we got over 50 identified artists, from $1 million painters to upcoming persons. And in that room, you saw every aesthetic, from the Indian diaspora to the African aesthetic to Chinese, and that is what it means to us, that it really is a moment to reflect all that is across the spectrum and to create spaces that don't normally exist for that reflection. Because I just want to add quickly that some of the artists in that exhibition who have sold their paintings for lots of money admitted that certain galleries would not host their work if it was too gay. And that says something. Sure. Because imagine you are an established person in your own right and you are still facing discrimination. So that is what the Pride must reflect, that continuous struggle for a space where you can truly see yourself and see your identity.
Sasha, you want to?
I think it's hard to say what pride reflects. For everybody, it's different on a personal level, because for some people, it's claiming space, some people, it's visibility, celebration, resistance, different things on a personal level. But definitely, I agree with Rudy that on a national level, our pride reflects our culture. So we start with the Interfaith Forum. Again, it's still pretty religious and has different religious groups. We do a Creek Lime. We like to lime. We have the Miss Diamond Infinity pageant, which has a history, I think, that predates the Pride, actually. And then we end with a parade, because we like to walk down the street and have a party. It goes back to Mashramani, where we started celebrating Republic Day, and that is our culture too. So, yeah.
I appreciate that. Yeah. Did you want to add more? You can.
I think for us, and I think as the organizer of Pride in Jamaica, I'm always trying to figure out how best as possible we can make Pride a very intersectional space. And so I think Pride, well, from my standpoint, and like, I think it goes into the planning and who we invite here and what kind of events and stuff like that. I think it has always been very important to me that Pride be a space where it has many different functions. So depending on the event, it's a different function for Pride. So say, for example, the event where we talk about religion and faith. For that event, the main purpose I'm thinking is to find a space where people can come and heal. A lot of people have had very traumatic experiences with religion and sexuality. And for a lot of people, like you talk about them at the church, and they have such very terrible experiences of in the church, and, like what was done to them, just because of their sexuality. For me personally, it's a very dear and soft spot for me, because I grew up in the church. From before I could talk, I was in the church. And my mother, even though she was never a Christian, she ensured that I was at Sunday school very early every Sunday. I had to do well when the end of the year for Christmas. I'm collecting awards because it's very serious for me. And so as I grew older, I was very involved in church. I was leader for youth. I was sign language. I was in dance ministry. I was all over the church. And as I grew older, and I kind of went on my journey in figuring out what was going on in my head, it was a very painful process for me. And I used to cry all the time to Mommy, because I was like, what do I do? Like, I don't understand. Is it me? Like what is happening? Something is not connecting. And, because I was so involved in church, I was like, I'm going to go to church camp, and I'm going to pray, because I know if I believe God, this will go away. And it just wasn't leaving. And I tried the having a boyfriend thing, and it just didn't work. And then I had to come to a space in my head where I said, oh no, but why can't I just exist at that intersection? Why do I need to act straight in church and then go back and act gay tomorrow, and then act and whatever? Why put yourself through all of that misery? Just exist where you are and just live as you are. And I think it's important to provide that space, a part of Pride Week or a part of your Pride celebration, because you have to include that space, because there are people who need that space to heal from a lot of trauma that they hold on to, and for a lot of them, until they process that, they're so like they can't function. So for me, pride is about having very difficult conversation. It's about like making the public see us have these difficult conversations. And again, for us to have that narrative over people. So you won't tell us that, oh, because you're gay, like you can't be in church, are you going to hell and you're still, oh no, that is not for you to tell us. Like we will tell you how we navigate this space. And yeah, so I think pride for us, there's a lot of different things happening, but I think the main themes that we carry on is a place where you have those conversations and how do we move on? Because you have to do that, because if not, then we're just existing in the same circle, we're just going around. So we have to, as LGBT people, have these discussions and then say, how do we move forward? And as a community, this is how we move forward. Sure. And you go along.
Do you want to say
All right. I mean, I think so covered it.
So in Barbados, going off of what you said, it's really, really important to make sure that when we're celebrating Pride, it is intersectional, that we're thinking about people of all abilities, we're thinking about poor people, people who are most disenfranchised, and people who are repeatedly told you are not allowed to claim space. So Pride is really about claiming space as citizens and as contributors to a society that continues to tell us that we need to be muted, we need to, exist in the shadows and the corners. Like, no, we deserve to be here. So it was a month-long celebration last year and this year in Barbados, and we made sure to have events that catered to the community, whether it be talking about sexual health, whether it be faith-based events, all sorts of different things that are intersectional, intergenerational. But with our Pride, it was also right before our Crop Over Festival, which is Barbados' carnival. So we ended with the parade, and the last year, it was, I think, 2 weeks before the climax of Crop Over, and it was really heavily influenced by that. I mean, people took the streets and they were just walking up in the streets and music. So it was really a cultural event, and I think it was really, really important to say we are claiming space as Barbadian people who are LGBT, and we are, celebrating our diversity and really just stating that, we deserve to be here. We are part of this community, we're part of this society, and we're not going away. Yeah.
I appreciate that. I think I want to ask, what criticism, if any, did you receive when you launched Pride, and how did you respond to it? Want to start, since this brother keeps on avoiding questions?
I think, so for us, we had our first public Pride back in August 2015. And so similar to what Cyril had said originally, is that a lot of people thought this was just unorthodox and uncalled for to be having Pride in the period where we have our Emancipation celebration, Emancipation and Independence celebration, which is a time for culture and heritage. Though we have so many parties in that time, and barely a handful of Jamaicans actually get to participate in national festivities around emancipation and independence. But outside of that, we also had lots of concerns among LGBT people about why Pride, why do we have to do this, are we ready yet? And to be very honest, we weren't 100% sure if we were even ready, but we thought it was important to begin to disrupt the narrative and to begin to claim that space in a much more visible way. I think Jamaica benefits from the fact that there are so many LGBT people who are at various levels proud and out about who they are, and that we have a real rich culture and vibrant community as LGBT people. So there are lots of parties. I mean, these days you have even 5 LGBT specific parties on one given weekend, and some people are running from events to events. So what the Pride Week did was that it gave us this 1 week where people let their hair down, and we begin to claim new people into this space who would not otherwise come to LGBT events. And that was what we did. We talked to people about this is why this is important, this is why Pride is so important, because we have to begin to do much more as a community and to show up and to do things. And so the first year was fairly quiet. We started with a flash mob at Emancipation Park, and it was planned for just about 15 people, and they came to the office every evening rehearsing a routine for the flash mob. And the morning we had perhaps about 30 to 50 people, some of whom knew the routine, others who just turned up because they wanted to be a part of it. And they went, and it was very early into the day. It was a holiday, so not too many people on the road, and they did their thing, and what should have lasted for 5 minutes turned into, I think, 30 minutes of just running around that big statue, naked statue that caused lots of problem in the past about its nakedness. And then they came back on the bus, waving rainbow flags through the window and stuff like that. And I think that really helped a lot of people in the community to understand that it's okay to be who you are, and that we can show up and be much more visible as a people. And I think that's what we've been doing, helping people understand that people are going to say negative things, but as a community, we have to understand the value and worth of a Pride celebration, even if you don't feel comfortable going to one of the events.
So for Trinidad, we also have ours close to our independence, because we got independence around the same time. It's important to understand a couple bits of the context. One is, we don't necessarily get a lot of public or overt pushback, homophobic pushback, generally in the society. It's mainly certain sections. So a piece of the Islamic spectrum, a piece of the Catholic spectrum. It's not across the board. So from the society, the main criticisms came similar to the usual, it's against God and breaking up the family system, etc., although they don't want to talk about divorce, but whatever. But that is very, very, very separate and apart from the real criticisms which actually came from within the LGBTQI community. And sometimes we have to, as community organizers, leaders, whatever word you want to use, we have to own those criticisms, and we have to have the patience and the presence of mind, the emotional mastery to treat with them and manage them, because they are born out of years of trauma, distrust, and all the other issues we're very familiar with. And they pivoted around matters that dealt with transparency. Who's making all these decisions? Why 50 events? I can't go to all of them. Where's the money coming from? Who decides which event is free? And the representation. Is Pride really reflecting the diversity that we spoke about earlier? Now, what was important for the committee was that we needed to hear these concerns and have real answers. So from year one to this year, we actually implemented a few things that came directly out of those criticisms. And we noted it. We communicated with the community. You said on your feedback forms or in the assessment meeting that these were some of the matters that you weren't comfortable with, and this is how we are treating with them. So it's just a matter of things that you would normally and reasonably expect to receive. I think the trick is, how do you respond? And if you don't take the time to respond to it, they can snowball into bigger issues that will overshadow what we are all fighting for. So those were some of the concerns that we got from within the community mainly, but outside of that, allies were amazing.
So just to add to that, because we had similar experiences, but just to point out, sometimes a criticism can end up being, on the flip side, kind of a little bit of an advantage, because when Guyana, we did a press release for a Pride Parade last year, a group of pastors came together and released the whole press thing to try and petition the government to make sure that this doesn't happen, this shouldn't happen, homosexuality is illegal, all that sort of stuff. We had a similar experience in Barbados. Yeah. And interestingly enough, because they did that and they got so much press and it was in all the papers, people then knew that there was a Pride Parade happening. And we got a good turnout and people came out in support. So
actually, between Jason Jones's case, which was against the Buggery law, and Pride, the first year, there was the International Day Against Homophobia. And the section of the churches that I referred to earlier, they planned a prayer day in one of our big parks, Woodford Square. So we thought about it and we said, what are we going to do about this? They set up their stage, their chairs, their tents, and we went with garbage bags and started to clean the square. These people were sitting down, praying to whomever, with all this garbage right around them. And the media took that and ran with it for days. Because people were like, what are you praying about when the country needs real help? And here are the gays coming to clean up the country.
That was funny. That was funny.
In Barbados, so like Guyana, we had like a month of events and it was relatively quiet. We had a lot of community support, but when it came time to the parade, because we had never had, something to this large scale before, in terms of a parade, the week before it happened, this evangelical sect of church leaders in the country, who their sole motive, their name is something with the family, something. Their sole purpose is they're an anti-LGBT organized evangelical group. So they had a press conference and they were pretty much urging the state to cancel the parade, because obviously we needed permission from the state, we had the support of the state, but they were urging the state to cancel it. And it also sort of highlighted the fact that people don't really know what the law is, because they were like, homosexuality is illegal. And we also realized that there is this huge centralization of the way that LGBT people have sex when we think about anything to do with LGBT people. So we're talking about a parade and they're going on the road about anal sex and like the dangers of anal sex and how it's going to cause, mass spread of HIV and AIDS, which, by the way, that's a whole other conversation. But so, there was that mass hysteria, but again, like Guyana, that sort of brought attention to our organizing. But what it also did, it sort of emboldened, even though they weren't violent in their rhetoric, not overtly so, it emboldened people to then start making a lot of threats. So we got a lot of death threats, we got a lot of, threats that people were going to show up and, bomb us and shoot into the crowd and all of that stuff. So people were afraid. There was, a lot of panic. People were really scared. But it really did create a lot of ally support, because I was expecting like 20 people to show up to this parade. And on the day we had like over 100 people there, and I was just like, who are these people? But a lot of them were so many allies. And then there were people who were religious leaders who showed up to the parade and said, these people do not represent us as a society. They don't represent us as a church. Even though they come as the church, they're not representative of all of us. So it sort of got a lot of allies to crawl out of their hiding spaces and come and support us.
Yeah, I appreciate it. David, I want to check on time. Thanks. So the Bermuda Pride logo adopts Philadelphia rainbow colors, which includes black and brown, to represent people of color and highlight racial diversity within the community. Why do you feel this is necessary in countries predominated by people of color?
Well, I think one of the things that the LGBT movement has done wrong is that it has allowed the community to look one particular way. And I think that's why Pride is so hugely important in our countries, because on one hand you begin to show the diversity in the community, and it begins to challenge those notions that the community has to look this particular way. You have to be a white cisgendered man to be able to be qualified as a part of this community, and you have to be of a particular ilk, right? And I think that has really affected the community right across the world. You go to parts of Africa, parts of the Caribbean, where black and brown bodies are, and so many of us do not feel as though we are gay enough, or we are lesbian enough, or transgender enough, because we don't ever see those images. We don't ever feel as though we are a part of this huge global community. And so when I saw the poster, when David had sent it to us originally, I felt really good about it, because I felt like, we don't even use it in Jamaica, but I felt that this was really intentional, that this was a real purposeful and carefully done thing, because black people, brown people, need to feel as though they are represented. And if you go to North America, you go to Europe, there are so many Black Pride events because the community does not feel as though they are a part of this.
The general pride.
They don't feel as though they are a part of this community, right? And it's especially concerning because when our people migrate to these places, they are sidelined even more because then you have to deal with all the other baggages that you didn't grow up in this culture, so you are not one of us fully, right? And it's so sad because we have a huge history as a community of pushing people away, of othering people, of not allowing people, and that's especially so for the trans community, though they have been in a number of our countries at the front, using their bodies, visibilizing the community, standing in the line of fire for many of us, as men especially, because let's face it, it's the women and trans women who have really led this fight in a number of countries by virtue of just being there and just being bold and courageous. And so kudos to kudos to Bermuda Pride for being so intentional and purposeful about including it.
I just want to add to, I think it's very important because I think over the years, Pride has gotten very commercialized. And I know it's a very free conversation, but I like to have it because it's important. I think Pride has become very commercialized. And while we want allies, and allies are important, and we want sponsors, because who else is funding Pride? But I think there has to be a way where we keep Pride political, because that's what started everything. It was about the politics. And it was about people saying, we are here, and we are showing up, and we're being resilient. So I think it's nice that they add that element of, to keep Pride centered and to keep it what it really is, which is an act of being political. And so I think adding that just made, just to remind people that, hey, this is what it is, not just like this week of fanfare, but whenever we say we're doing Pride, it's something with purpose, and we're just not up here just partying every day.
Because we also took it for granted. Hindsight is 20/20, 40/40, 100/100. We are, even those of us that have white ancestry, we all see ourselves as a certain way. We see ourselves as black and brown people because we know how cis white people might see us, right? So we just took it for granted that Pride would represent who we are. But the thought that Bermuda has put into it has given us that moment of pause. And that's why your very first question about that dealt with how we integrate with each other and how we share, as opposed to being in competition, we give. We have to give to each other. That gave us a moment of pause. And we are discussing how to reanimate our visual branding to include that for that political statement, because it needs to be done. It can't be taken for granted. And even though another part of it, though, I think, is the hard wiring that has gone on through media, which determines how we even see ourselves and what we think is beautiful, what we think is strong and acceptable. Pride has a role in that as well. How do we re-network our brains so that the younger ones especially start seeing, so it's not just the color, but how does the color translate into real life, that these persons are equitably and equally members of one LGBTQI community.
I also think it comes back to colonization and the insidiousness of the remnants of colonization. And I mean, colonization has really affected not just our region, but black and brown people. I mean, the world over. I mean, even if you're speaking about HIV, if you look at people who are most affected by HIV, it's people in the sub-Saharan region and within the English-speaking Caribbean, and that is a direct result of colonization. And it's black and brown people. So I think it's really important because, I mean, in Barbados, we are a population that is over 90% people of African descent. But when we had our parade, those numbers were completely disproportionate to the actual population. And I think it's important to note that the people who are told that they're not allowed to occupy spaces and queer spaces are those who are poor, black, trans, gender non-conforming, and they're told that they need to be pushed and shoved into the corners. So I think it's important to be intentional in saying that black and brown people deserve to exist within these spaces. Yeah.
Thank you. It's been a lovely conversation. I have one more question. I'm glad I have these because there's a host of things I have to ask. Part of the aim of Bermuda Pride is to raise visibility of members of the LGBTQI community who are often overlooked and whose issues are often ignored. For example, the trans community. What work is being done in your country to advance trans issues?
So as I said, this year
Right.
we dedicated ours to the trans community. But what was important in that, because we manage over 50 stakeholders, right? Different NGOs, individuals. We met with the head of the Trans Coalition and her committee very early on. And we let them inform what their needs were, because it has to be community driven. And simple things that, again, you sometimes take for granted. That's all people want sometimes, is a space, a voice. And they came out, they launched Pride outside our parliament with the trans flags and the Pride flag. The Kings came out because Trinidad also has something called the King Show, which is done by IM1. And there were kings visiting from different islands as well. And together, for the first time, you saw this representation. And they had to trust us. Because in the past, others had promised to stand with them and for them and help them, and then shied away. And there was a lot of hurt there and distrust. And Brandy and everyone else, they took a moment and they said, okay, let's try this again. And we were able to provide a platform so that we're not speaking on their behalf. If we're going to meet with the media, if we are having events, no, it's things you might presume that you can sit here and talk about the issues, but they needed to be with us and seen together representing. And the other thing that was important was to assist in educating other people in the community. Because again, we don't always understand each other's issues, even though there's some commonality. When people misspoke or they referred to people in an inappropriate manner or they wanted to ask questions that are offensive, right there and then, we took the moment to have that training and that learning and say, okay, we hear what you're asking, but this is how you should ask it. And they would explain from their position exactly how those kinds of perceptions make them feel. And we had an entire trans discussion panel with the help of the UK High Commission, and that live feed probably got more views than some of the regular events, like just everyday workshops or a movie screening, because for the first time, you had trans people speaking to the entire nation about their issues, what they needed, and what help the rest of us could give to them, and saying, I'm here, I'm not going anywhere, and I'm a full equal citizen of Trinidad and Tobago. And that's what you need to do, is give the platform and then kind of step back and let them go with it.
Yeah. So on that note, I mean, I agree. Like, I don't like speaking about trans issues because I'm not trans, and I feel like they need to self-represent. But that being said, Guyana was one of the last countries in the world that had a cross-dressing law, where it was illegal for persons to dress as the opposite sex. It wasn't really enforced a lot, but it was used to specifically target trans women, and a few years ago, several trans women were arrested and had to go up to before the judge. The judge told them they should really give their life to Jesus, and misgendered them, so they couldn't come into court dressed in female attire, that sort of thing. So SASOD, in collaboration with URAP, can't remember what that stands for right now, but the University of West Indies, our legal team, appealed the case and carried it all the way to the High Court, where the judge said that it wasn't really unconstitutional to have this law because the law says it's cross-dressing for an improper purpose. But then he didn't say what was an improper purpose, so that made no sense. And then we carried it all the way up to the CCJ, the Caribbean Coast for Justice, which was the highest court, and last year we won that case. So I think that's been a big step for the trans community in Guyana.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So we've been doing a number of things. So for one, in Pride, for example, we have the big rainbow flag, which is a couple feet long, and we also have a trans one, and we have lots of trans flags that we also purchase for the celebration, in addition to lesbian and bisexual and agender, etc. But outside of Pride, we have ensured that, one, we include transgender persons within our activities as an organization. So at our different events, we use trans persons for panels, etc. One thing we noticed at one point was that in a lot of ways when transgender persons are included, it's usually for performance. So you have trans people for lip syncing, etc. But then we thought that it's important to begin to help people to understand that transgender people have lots of different talents, and that they're able to speak and they're able to say different things and do different things, and not just to share, negative personal experiences or perform for entertainment. Within the organization, we also have what we call a Transforming J-Flag policy, which means that we are expected to ensure that there are opportunities created for transgender persons, etc., and that they're treated equally and fairly and given all the opportunities anybody else would be given within the organization. And given the circumstances related to the fact that a number of transgender persons who we typically know do not necessarily have the educational qualification, and so where there are opportunities where you don't necessarily need a degree or some subjects, we provide that opportunity. So for example, one staff member now, we had a little project that we were doing where you could basically just find somebody who you think has talent and potential and who could deliver. And we provided that opportunity to a transgender person. They performed really, really well, and was then given an opportunity to be an admin assistant in the organization. And so we've been doing that kind of thing. When we have trainings with healthcare workers, for example, we include specific panels about transgender persons and how you relate to them, etc. We ensure that our partners undertake studies and talk to their staff about these issues, because we find that for a lot of people it's fairly new to them and they don't understand all the dynamics, etc. And so it's up to us to begin to help people while we also try and understand much better about the needs and realities of transgender persons. And importantly, finally, calling out transphobia within the LGBT community, especially among gay men who I find to be very, very transphobic. Right? So that's a huge part of what we do, just helping people understand that it's homophobia and transphobia and biphobia, though we don't say the biphobia that much, but homophobia and transphobia, and that transphobia exists in our spaces, and we have to begin to show respect to transgender persons.
Yeah. Thank you. I know. Sorry. Last but not least, I want to give you a chance to talk about your country. In
Barbados, I think in so many different places around the world, transgender people have been on the front lines of activism for a long time, but they're not represented in the way that resources are allocated, not represented in leadership. In Barbados, our first LGBT organization was actually co-founded by Didi Winston, who was a trans woman in 2000. But I think it's important, within Pride and outside Pride, that trans people are included in leadership making decisions. Like, you can't make decisions on behalf of a community. So one of the organizations that I work with, Equals, we have 2 directors, and one of our directors is a trans woman. We have a few CSOs in Barbados, and another organization called SEED is also led by a trans person. And because trans people are within leadership positions, obviously they're more connected to their community, and they're able to really ascertain the specific needs of the community. In terms of healthcare, the fact that so many trans people are forced into sex work, and then oftentimes people are just reduced to how they have sex and their parts. So what C does is provide people with, life skills, cooking skills. We don't think about mental health a lot, so with our organization, we make sure to have free access to counseling, free access to things like PrEP, condoms, lube, testing, particularly for the communities that have a lot of trouble accessing public health care, because a lot of the time a trans person wants to go to the doctor, and before they could even go inside at the free clinic, they're met with a security guard misgendering them, and then people don't want to access services. So I think that is really important. But also, even when we're just having conversations, it's important to include trans people in ways that we don't even think about them. So if we're thinking about menstruation and sexual health, we don't think about the fact that trans men and non-binary people often are excluded from the menstrual health conversation, or excluded from the sexual health conversation. When we're talking about abortion, abortion is not just a woman's issue. Trans men are often affected by access or inaccess to abortion. Or when we're talking about legislation, our legislation doesn't even mention gender identity. So a lot of the time when we're just talking about our legislation and the way in which LGBT bodies are criminalized, we just mention sexual orientation. So now that we're working towards trying to have anti-discrimination legislation, it's important that gender identity is included in there, and we've been intentional in making sure that it is included so that trans people's issues are brought to the forefront.
Thank you for taking your time. Sorry, David. Are you gonna what? I think we're going to turn it over. I'm going to turn it back to David, who I think is going to open us up for questions.
So we're gonna open it up to questions. But before I do, I just wanted to recognize that we have our human rights commissioners here, and they've actually volunteered to do the mics for handing around for the Q&A. So if I can have 3 of you at the front, that would be great. Now do you see why we invited them here? Aren't they fantastic? Okay, so we will open it up to you, and you'll see these are 3 of our human rights commissioners coming around with the mic, so feel free to ask away.
Oh, Zakia, just before they get over their shyness, we actually chose the park that we have pride in, Mandela Park, because Sasha Fierce was, a trans sister was murdered there, and we named one of the events a fashion show, Fierce, after her. And that's a real way that prides can help. We have to remember the fallen ones, so we're going to utilize their names. So we lost Raymond Chukong, who was a theater producer. We have created a theater grant in his name. So we're going to continue doing that to keep our people really alive with us. And I think that's a real way that we need to support them.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Hello.
I'm very shy, so you have to bear with me.
Hi. Sorry. Say that again.
Hi, my name is Linda Berger-Mainzer. If literally, if I could come up there and hug and kiss you all,
You can do it after.
like I literally would, because well, I can't now because I'm married now. I can't do those things like I used to. But I just want to tell you, I want to start out by telling you thank you, thank you, thank you. Because I've been preaching intersectionality since Zakia Lord Johnson. Yeah? Yeah. Perfect. Since she brought it up in 2014? 2014, 2013.
Yeah.
And for me, it is why I understand the pushback from the black community in this country, because they cannot move past how they feel that racism has been ignored by a sector of our community that has embraced pride, right? And so I get it. I get it. And so that is why we need to have that conversation about inclusiveness. We should never have had the argument why black and brown is in the pride parade, in the pride flag. And we still have that discussion, which is so frustrating for me. And so because we still have that discussion, because there is no recognition of the trans community in the flag that is part of us, because there is no representative of the trans community up there with you on the panel, it says we have work to do. And until we do the work internally, we are going to struggle with total inclusiveness. So I want to ask you, how do you recommend that we begin to have that real honest dialogue internally within our community so that we can really make pride about total inclusiveness and in fact heal our country from years of historic trauma that we, the black community, understand. I know that there are people that don't hate us for having pride, but there are people that hate us for only recognizing that we come together as one in these areas of pride and economic privilege that we don't do in the black community. And so for me, not only am I gay, but also I'm a traitor. Because in the dialogue that we're having now, you've crossed over with a community that doesn't recognize the impact of racism in this country. So I want to ask you, how do you go about healing that fence? I know Saki and I, we talk about intersectionality a lot, but what does it really look like in the black community? What does it really look like inside of the LGBTQI community? And how did it feature in your push to have better intersectionality in your product?
So 50 stakeholders with great diversity. Pride is not done by one person in Trinidad and Tobago. It's done by a core group, yes, maybe about 4 or 5 people, and they're all looking on at us, but you have to keep each one of those people at the table. And sometimes it means that you have to put your ego in a box and put it under the table and listen. Because what you said, it's historic trauma. They're not necessarily criticizing or expressing a point of view or attacking you because they don't like you. Maybe that's part of it, but that's okay. It's because they have a real deep-seated challenge that they want to have a voice in their own space. And to keep all of those 50 people at a table, many of whom have great egos, they have their own strong personalities, they have issues with insecurities, it takes that patience and that level of acknowledgement that you sometimes have to remove your voice from that table, because your voice has weight, it has privilege, it has strength, and if you keep speaking, theirs is never going to have any weight in the room. And that's how we try to do it.
So to just add to that, by the way, I saw your videos on Facebook and I hot reacted them, so yeah, I'm in the Pride group, the Bermuda Pride group. Anyway, I think it's important that we just continue to have the conversations that are difficult. People don't like to talk about difficult things. People don't like to talk about things that make them uncomfortable. People don't like to talk about the racism within the community, the white supremacy, the misogyny, the transphobia, the biphobia. But it's important that we keep having these conversations, and it's important that we are unapologetic about it. So you're going to get a lot of resistance, and I mean, you can't placate people all the time. The conversations need to happen because we notice that these issues are insidious, and the people who are most affected are the people who are the most vulnerable. So it's important that we continue just to have these conversations, regardless of if people are uncomfortable, but also just creating space at the table for people who are of the most vulnerable communities to contribute to that conversation.
Tessie.
Hi.
I thank each and every one of you all for coming to Bermuda. I have been struggling for these last couple of weeks when Pride was announced in this country. And I'm one of those persons with that strong voice. I've held my tongue for the last couple of weeks. I've spoke to people that I can talk to about the feelings that I've been going through in these last couple of weeks. And everything that each of you have said up on that stage today was everything that I've been going through. And I want to thank you for speaking the words for me, because I've been trying to stay calm, y'all. I've been really trying to stay calm in not really vocalizing what I really wanted to say. And for a part of me, I honestly thought that it was my selfish reasons. You know how you get in that way of your thinking, you're like, you know, and I'm looking at this picture because I'm a person standing before you. I'm from Bermuda, but I had the privilege of living in the United States for almost 15 years. I was part of a committee in the gay prides in New York City, and I've seen a lot of vision. Everything that you spoke about, I was there, and I really tried to express in a kind way. I really tried, but they wasn't hearing me, wasn't hearing me. And I thank you guys. I really thank you guys. And I just hope that this day, Linda, that we move forward, because we really need to stick together as a community. Within the gay community, we need a committee. I love that word when you said it. I wanted to kiss your big toe when you said it.
Which one?
Talking to you, Rudolph. When you said that, and it's all about transparency. It's all about the people that have come together, stood together, brought this country to where we are. We all have a voice, but we all have to respect each other's opinions, and we have to come together. We have to come together to deal with this. You know what I'm saying? Drag is a very vital part of the gay community. You understand what I'm saying? I'm the Queen of Bermuda. I know it. You understand what I'm saying? It's very important. I was arrested doing drag. So when you were speaking about that, I lived it. You see what I'm saying? And there are issues that still need to be addressed in this country. Everybody has a valid point. Everybody has an opinion. But until you sit down and hear everybody's opinion, we can come together to make this country stronger. But we all have to work together. We have to put aside our jealousy. We have to put aside our vulnerability and all of that type of stuff. And we have to respect each other's space.
Yeah.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you, guys. I'm giving you a free ticket to my show tomorrow night. Okay? I want you guys to come to my show. All right? Thank you.
What's your name? What's your name? Sorry, what's your name?
Mark Anderson.
Mark, I want to just jump and say this to you. There's a young lady, a young attorney, who was part of Pride last year, Aaliyah, and she made the point that we must come to each other with compassion. And it's something that I have tried it's not always easy. It's not always easy because everybody is seeing the goal, but maybe the journey to get there differently.
Yes.
And all I can say is continue to have compassion and some patience, but to our co-organizers, we need to be more open and responsive and leave the door always open. People can leave and people can always come back. And that's the takeaway point. Don't lock the door. If people choose to leave because right now they feel away or they have up in their feelings, no problem. That door must always remain open so the day they want to enter, and sometimes you have to go outside and say, hey, we need your input on something. You want to come back inside? And they might tell you, no, I won't come, but I'll tell you outside. And you bring it back to the table. And it takes work. but I think we're all showing you that we can do the work together. So thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I think, is it working? So, yeah, I think the other thing too is just to acknowledge that Pride is a lot of work. Even if you're just doing it for a day, it's a whole lot of work, and you never ever get everything right, especially on the first go. And so that's why advocacy and representation is so important, because for those of us who feel that we may not have been represented enough or given opportunities in the first or second go, we have to keep reminding those who are organizing that it's important that this is done, or that you missed this. I mean, we've been doing it for 5 years, and every time when it comes to the time for Pride, I get so anxious because I feel there's something that I'm missing, that I'm not understanding, that just has to be done. And so I think the important thing is going to be about how, as a community, we show up and show support, and how we understand that regardless of what, we must always express our opinion. We must always work with those who are leading to say, this is our concern, this is how you can do it. Or if you have to rant and curse and say, well, you know, this is the problem I'm having, but I have absolutely no idea how we're going to solve this particular problem, but at least somebody knows that you would have registered a concern or an issue, and that they begin to work on it. And I guarantee you, next year is going to be better, and the year after that is going to be better, and the year after that is going to be better. And it's going to keep getting better, because that's just how we are as a community. I think as well, we have to understand that although we're all LGBT people, and sometimes it seems as though we're just a small number of people, it's never going to be this one big happy community where we sit around a bonfire and have kumbaya, right? We're going to have differences. We're going to have people who think differently, right? But what we must ensure is that during the time of Pride, all those views are put aside, and that we understand that the person that we may disagree with all year can have an opportunity to Pride and to be happy and to provide an activity or show some sort of support, and that all of us who are not necessarily intimately involved in the Pride organizing in our countries have to support the leaders of Pride to grow professionally and personally, so that the Pride can actually be representative of what all of us want as a community.
Okay.
Hold on one second.
I think she had.
Hi,
She was.
I'm Eliza Olander. I'm 16, and I just wanted to say, first of all, that it's incredible to have you guys here, and you know, to see an open lesbian like you, and to hear your story, like even if you struggled, which is incredible. What was I going to say?
It's okay.
Oh yeah, well, I was going to talk about schools and how I was wondering if your countries do anything to empower like queer youth, and so if you're doing anything to help them to spread it. Sorry? Oh, bring it closer, yeah. Because like oh yeah. This I've always known since I was about, like I had my first girlfriend when I was 7, and so since then I always tried to live out and tell other youth that they can live the same way. Like this year, for instance, I've met a lot of other queer kids, including my great friends all here. So anyway, so I just wanted to ask if your countries are doing anything in schools with trying to start queer youth groups or anything in that area.
Good evening.
Wait.
Can you answer? Can y'all answer that? Go ahead. You gotta answer.
So unfortunately, in Jamaica, because of how our sexual grooming laws are framed, we can't engage people under the age of 18 years. So it's a very sticky place because we can't talk to people, or I should just say, youth and children. We can't have that conversation with them about sexuality, anything on that spectrum. We can't do that. But what we try to do is we try to have partners in different agencies that we know at some point in time might have that interaction. And what we do is try to build their capacity. So when that time comes, even if persons reach out to us, we can't engage you, but here is a partner that we have that we know, will be able to navigate that kind of conversation. Right now, I'm doing some focus group discussions with persons from the state. So persons who are, whether it be you're a social worker, guidance counselor, you're a teacher, in the police force. And basically what we're trying to do is we're trying to get information about what are the challenges that you're having, when you have to interact with, whether it be LGBT children in the classroom or wherever, what are the challenges that you're having. So we know as an organization, even though we can't directly engage these children or whatever, but we have a better understanding how we can, build your capacity to kind of, oh, it's not working? I don't know what's going on.
Closer.
Oh, and it's moving. Well, I hope you heard what I said before. So it's just about trying as best as possible from our standpoint to empower people, because we can have that discussion. And it's unfortunate because people reach out to us all the time, and they're like, I don't know what's happening and I'm so confused. I just want somebody to talk to. And, unfortunately, we have to say, we can't really have this conversation, but here is a person that might. But I know our youth affiliate, I think we're in the process of implementing a helpline that hopefully will kind of be able to help that kind of conversation. But for now, we can't.
Well, Amber, first of all, thank you so much for being here. You're so brave, and I'm so proud of you for being here. When I was your age, when I was 16, I was petrified of anybody even thinking that I was queer. So, I wish that I had your bravery and courage when I was 16. But within our organization, in Barbados, the age of consent to sex is 16. But again, people usually just think of sex when they think of the LGBT community, and not in many other ways in which the community needs support. So we can't directly give sexual services to children, but we have counseling available. We have an LGBT center in Barbados, so youth are welcome to come there. We also recently started the LGBT Youth for Equality chapter of our organization, which is Equal. So they have a youth sect, and they're mostly between the ages of 16 to maybe 22. But also partnership with people who are connected to youth is really, really important. So earlier this year, an organization called Dance for Life, there's a huge what is it called?
Exhibition.
Expo, yeah. I wasn't sure what that was short for. There's a huge expo for children in secondary school from Form, I don't know how you all say it here, but from Form 1 to Form 6. There's a huge expo for them, focus on all sorts of different things that kids love. And they asked us to come and be there and talk to the children about sexuality and sexual orientation and gender identity, and it was thousands of kids, and we set up a booth. And what I find really interesting is when you're talking to kids, they're just so receptive, not all of them, but they're a lot more receptive than adults, and they're really willing to learn. So we set up a booth, and they came and they spoke to us. Some of them asked for condoms, we weren't allowed to give them, but we set up a booth. We spoke to them about sexual orientation, about gender identity. We told them that they could contact us if they need help, but it's important to let them know that we're there, and not just focus on the sexual aspect of thing, providing support in so many other ways.
So also we do three things. One is, as my colleague said, we partner with a group called Silver Lining Foundation, which was actually formed, hail to them and Kennedy and the rest of the team, because someone around that age actually took their life. And they came together, it's a friend of theirs, and they created this foundation that runs a program called Stronger Families. And what they do is they get the families in the room with the kids, and they have psychiatrists and counselors engage both parties and try to make both sides understand the challenges. Because one can imagine what parents might go through, and sometimes we are on the receiving end of it, and we don't understand our parents. But both sides need to understand each other. So at Pride, we don't compete with other groups. We try to create a platform and bring resources to the table so that they can reach more people with those types of programs. So that's one. Secondly, we created a program called Generation Gap, G.A.P. Definitely a play on the words for people who know what that used to mean. It's a session where elders in the community come together on a panel, if you will, and we invite young people to come forward. And in that room, we discuss issues, we share stories, we let everyone have liberty to speak about matters. And in sessions like that, young people actually said, one person in particular that comes to mind, that had they known that all these people had lived through similar experiences and made a life for themselves, they would not be harming themselves. Because that's part of the challenge, right? Is that the younger generation doesn't always know their own history. They don't know who the role models are, because some of us have had to live in secret. So we can't identify, and people can look up and say, ooh, the Attorney General is, or the doctor is, or who the teacher is. And then the third thing we do is simply to empower young people. We've had parents bring their kids out to Pride events, even the parade, and what we do is say, listen, if you as a parent wants to empower your child, because we can't engage with them because of the consent issues, you let us give them the tools, and you have to talk to your peers. Because as someone that has found the courage to stand here and ask that question and represent and identify, you now have the opportunity and a bit of responsibility to go back into your group, your peer group, and engage with them, because we can't. The law doesn't sometimes allow us. So that's what we can do as Pride organizations, is give you resources and give you that platform, and you do it. You become a leader, a youth leader, and you make the change that you want to see in your community.
Yeah. I think you said we had 2 more. Did you say the mic on it? How many? 2 more minutes? We have 2 more minutes left. Oh, the young person.
The lady there. Oh.
I just wanted to go back, keep talking about this subject of the youth. Also, because in schools, at least in my school, we don't see so many assemblies talking about the LGBTQ plus community. And so a lot of the kids and younger children that are in the LGBTQ plus community get often ridiculed or mocked or laughed at, and so they live in secret and are afraid. And all of this is, I feel, because of the lack of visibility and the lack of communication of the LGBTQ plus community to kids and younger generations. So I just wanted to say that.
Yeah.
There's a young person again with their hand, but in the spirit of nothing about us without us, if I could ask it, Meredith, I see you in the back, I hope we have time for it, but can I ask that this young person be given a chance to speak really quickly? If we're talking about them and they're taking the time to speak with us, I think we should hear them. Is there a mic that can come 5 rows back? Oh, there we go. Meredith can keep it. Can you come up? I'm sorry that you can't. Can you put your hand back up? Oh, thank you.
Hi, my name's Keisha. I'm recently 18, and I just wanted to talk about because I went to Berkeley before I went to Bermuda College, and I have experience with basically fighting with adults and teachers during classes and stuff like that to protect my sexuality and those who I knew were undercover in my school. And I just want to ask a question, because I got this asked to me by a lot of adults, because I'm bi. So I haven't been in like a female relationship, so they would always try to use that against me because I didn't want to be in a relationship with any gender at the time, and be like, oh, if you haven't been with the girl, then how do you know that you're bi? And I just want to know, why do older people tend to believe that just because you haven't had experience, then your sexuality doesn't matter because it's a sexuality?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important just to keep helping people understand that you don't have to have an actual sexual experience for you to know who you are, right? And the question I like to ask people is, a virgin who is heterosexual, and how does that person know that they're actually heterosexual?
Yeah, nobody
since they've
asked
never
that
had
question.
an experience. And people usually understand. I think it's a little bit more complicated when people are bisexual, because for some reason, everybody, in the LGBT community and outside, our heads get a little bit wrapped up in all sorts of different madness. But I think it's always just reminding people that our sexuality is not about who we have sex with, and when we have sex and where we have sex. It's just a part of how we identify as people, and it's not limited to an actual sexual engagement with someone.
Yes.
Yeah.
Also,
She's sitting.
Right, Keisha, thank you for your question and for being here. And I just want to say, as being bisexual, you're going to face a lot of scrutiny from the general public and from within the community, probably for the rest of your life or for as long as you claim bisexuality. But you don't owe anything to anybody. You don't owe an explanation about your sexuality to anybody.
Thank you again. Thank you for answering that. If I can just add to that, I do think that underrepresented communities, often people feel entitled to our answers. They feel entitled to ask us questions that they wouldn't ask majority culture, whatever that is, right? Whether that's underrepresented genders or racial representations, and sexuality falls into that. And so even, as a person who's a little bit older than you, reminding myself that I have lines, and I don't owe anybody my answers. And when I give them, it's a privilege, and I hope they treat it as such. And so I just encourage you that as well, is that if you feel like you know yourself, that has to sometimes be enough.
Yeah, yeah.
My understanding, I'm so sorry that we relinquished the mic, but I do appreciate your grace that we gave the young people a chance. And I do hope that our guests will be with us a little bit this evening as well as tomorrow. And it's a very beautiful full day, so I'll take the liberties of saying that if the question is present, and it is for these individuals, that you'll find the time to ask it. Because I trust that it's valid and it's important that you have an answer. It just may not be able to be answered in this moment right here. So thank you again for your time. I'm going to relinquish it back over to the organizers of this event to close us out and to say our thank yous, and to thank you again for the people in the room for their time as well. So who's going to, Chan, are you going to close it out?
Saki, I have my question.
Thank you very much.
Yes. First of all, I want to compliment the organizers of the event. Let's give a hand to our Bermudian. Thank you. And also, the panel, you guys were really, really great. Really proud of the fact that you were able to come here and share with us your experience in the islands. One of the things that we have been through in Bermuda, and I want to ask the question for you, is how do you find that the leadership in your country, aside from yourselves, of course, actually participate and help to advance the cause that you have in your country? I know that in Barbados, for example, you have an openly lesbian prime minister, Mia Mottley, who I admire a lot, not because she's only a lesbian, but she's a brilliant speaker. I think she's really one of the best of our time, actually, Mia Mottley. If you haven't heard her, you'll listen to her. But in any case, what I wanted to find out, and I think it's important, one of the things that we tend to do in Bermuda, we love foreign. We love to hear what foreigners have to say. It's part of who we are culturally, and I think it goes back to what Linda was trying to point out earlier. So some of the issues that we have is not honoring those who went before us. So I want to know, how do you guys honor people that went before you? Not because I went to my first Pride Parade. I was in my 20s. I was 22 years old, and I've been to several prides over the years. I went to my last one in London last month. And of course, we in Bermuda are very excited about the fact that we're having Pride, and we're really happy that this group who went down to the Caribbean, of course, and heard what they heard and brought it back and organized it so quickly. It's not like it was a year planning, from my understanding, and I think we'll all see tomorrow that they've really done a brilliant job. And for those of us who are here to attend and enjoy, I'm sure we'll have a great time, and we'll make it a great time. So the question I'd like to know is, how do you honor those who went before you? Because in Bermuda, we have people who fought, like myself, since 1994. I was part of the Stubbs Bill, brought a private member's bill to Parliament. I was a former member of Parliament, former minister, all of that. So we have a lot of people who, whether they're church members, whether they're ministers, who actually fought to bring this day about. Looking at my friend here, Mark, we've actually helped to bring this day about, and we're very excited to enjoy it. So what is it you find in your country that has gone before you? Because obviously you guys were very, very, very brave, I would think, particularly in some of the islands. I mean, I was absolutely floored when I found out Jamaica had a pride, and had any, because when I lived in Jamaica, it was as homophobic as one could ever find on the planet. So I thought, wow, Jamaica even had some type of pride recognition, Guyana as well, before Bermuda. So, you know, better late than never, we'll make good of it. But the point is, how is it you found that you evolved as a group based on some form of those who went before you?
I think I think it's important for us, the first thing to do is to document our history. And we're living in an age where we can do we can take out a phone and do a recording, we can do a little type up thing and save it in the cloud or whatever. I think it's important to document history. In Jamaica, we didn't have a lot of documentation. And so when we were celebrating our 20th anniversary last year, I was saying to Javen, I want to do a nice video, you know, of like advocacy back in the 90s. I know, like when they used to have pride and the little things. And it was hell. We had almost next to nothing. And all the people that were very involved, they're either like old and they're just done with this whole thing, like they just want nothing to do with it, or they're not in Jamaica anymore, and so we were left with maybe like just memories, asking somebody, hey, like what was it, whatever, like what was a highlight during this time, or like who do you think I can talk to? And I think I've learned from that is document every single thing. And I mean, like I think the good thing for you guys is that you have people who are still very vibrant and very active. Get a day and document that. Just do videos, do recordings, ask people, you know, like when were you involved from 1996 to 1998? Talk about that era, like what was it like, what were you doing, who was next to you when you were out in the streets, like who was beside you, who was doing this. Document that, because when you're gone, we're left with hearsay, and hearsay is not always the best. So I'm always telling people, document, and who you have in memory, try to do anything to honor them. So like for us, like as much as little things, if it's even like a social media campaign, it's very small, but you put your history out there. And I've realized in Jamaica, people don't know anything about our LGBT history. And we have such a rich history. We have from, I think it's in 1960s or 70s. Yeah. And I remember that there was this old, there was this man, I think he was one of our founding fathers at J-Flag. And he migrated, I think maybe 10 years or over. And he came and, you know, we came up with the idea that we wanted to do a tour of Kingston with him. And when I tell you that man took us to some places and he told us they used to have LGBT parties downtown Kingston, Jamaica. And we went on a tour. It lasted, like we ended maybe at like 8 o'clock in the night. And when I left, I was like, how do people not, like people don't, 90% of us didn't even know that there was an active gay scene in downtown Kingston in the 1970s. And to me, that's like, that's like so cool, you know? So I think document everything you can. While you're alive, document everything.
Yeah.
Document everything. Yeah.
I want to add to that because this is actually like a pet thought project of mine. I'm so glad you asked that question because I was having a discussion the other day and I'm like, where are LGBTQ elders? We don't see them. They obviously exist, they're there, but there's this huge gap between the present crop and what came before. And we don't know, a part of it is obviously the whole invisibility. So we just going on what was documented, there was actually a wedding between two men in, I think it was, I might be wrong, it was 1970s, and it was like front page news. But since then, there's nothing until the 90s when we had our first organization, which was in a response to the HIV/AIDS crisis. And I'm like, this can't be. So I actually decided that one of the things I'm going to do is investigate the queer history of Guyana and try to make a book out of it to see if it's enough to actually do that. But that's where the documentation comes in. And I think you guys should even do that in Jamaica, even now.
We have no
you should
history
start
anywhere.
documenting these things because, I mean, you know, the guy that gave you the tour, so that you can use that history. And it's really important question.
And that's why we named the event Generation Gap that I spoke about earlier, because of the gap.
Yep.
But it's also gay and proud. So we did that, where we document, we film everything. Because ironically, this year we lost Raymond Chukong, who is Trinidad's foremost theater producer, right? And he's won national awards, he's acclaimed, but people didn't know he was gay, right? And last year, if it weren't for Generation Gap, we would have lost a lot of his story. Because at that event, he shared about his coming out, what it was like growing up, what the experiences were, and we have that now documented that we were able to show at his memorial event that we had. Now, on top of that, I mentioned earlier, we're launching grants or other programs. So we're launching things in people's names so that that will continue as a legacy to honor them. And we also start Pride by having every first Sunday of Pride is something called Memorial, which actually an old NGO, which is more than 20 years old, Friends for Life, they host it every year, where there's an entire list of all of our people that contributed, that we know of, that identified, and what they did. So artists, musician, doctor, etc. And we have that list. And then I suppose now I could say it since you asked the question. People have been asking, what's the theme for Pride TT 2020? And what we've actually decided is that we're going to play on 2020. So we're going to choose 20 of our elders and 20 of our upcoming young people, and that's going to be the theme and the focus for 2020. Yes.
Good team.
Thank you.
I love it.
Every time I see them from the bottom of my heart, I'm glad you came to our home. I'm glad you came and brought the sunshine and the rainbow with you. Thank you. Thank you. Just to reiterate what Liz mentioned, part of honoring our history and those who went before us, we are honoring Upi Ming tomorrow. So if you have not picked up the tribute that has been lovingly prepared by Liz, please do so. It will be at the back of the room. And that will give you a sense of part of the reason why we've chosen to honor him and his family tomorrow. That's all I want to say. Thank you. Happy Pride. See you early tomorrow. Good night.
Oh,